meeting, and before I start, a few meeting housekeeping. Before we start the meeting, a little housekeeping for this evening. Please can I remind all attendees of the following. Please can all mobile phones be kept on silent or turned off during the meeting where possible. There are no fire alarms planned, so in the event of the fire, please make your way out of the room and follow a member of staff to the evacuation point on Southern Hay Green at the Blitz Tree. I would like to explain some changes that the executive has made to the format of this meeting to better enable us to address the key issues, members' questions, and make the best use of our time to ensure that we are giving all reports proper consideration. After officers introduce the report, I will invite questions and comments from executive members. Then I will invite opposition members to make any comments that they would like the executive to consider in our decision making. Where there are questions, I will ask the portfolio holder to either respond or refer to an officer. As usual, if answers cannot be provided in the meeting, we will circulate them subsequently. Portfolio holders will then confirm the recommendation from the report and we will move to the vote. Please also note that some items have already been appropriately considered and debated by other committees. For example, at scrutiny and audit and governance. For efficiency, I ask that members do not repeat the same questions which have already been answered at those committees, or if they are waiting for an answer outside of the committee. Thank you. Okay, right. So I now move on to apologies. I don't believe there are any.
No, it's a full house, Chair.
Full house. You agreed that I sign the minutes of the 5th of November as a true copy? Thank you. Declarations of interest, please make them known prior to the item being discussed. Item 4 is the local government access to information, 1972, exclusion of the press and public. Item 17A, appendix, is consideration in part 2. If there are any questions relating to that appointment, we will then go into part 2 after, but the detail is being done in the item 16. Item 5, there's been no public questions received. There will be a slight change to the agenda, which I will be bringing forward item 13, the review of polling districts, just after we dealt with item 6. Jeff, you won't have to endure it all, so that's what I was thinking. Sorry, Kat and Simon and the rest of you. That's the way it goes. So we move straight on to members' allowances, which is item 6. And I'm going to ask Derek Phillips, who is the chair of the Independent Remuneration Panel, to come in and to talk us briefly through your recommendations or any points you want to draw to our attention, Derek. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me on that. So I think the report this year is fairly straightforward. I would just bring your attention to a couple of items. The panel did consider whether basing the allowance increase each year as the same figure as the local government pay award. And in your paper, you will see that some councils do not do this. Most do, I must add, but some of them go to the CPI, which we've given you as a comparison there. But having said that, the panel noted that your allowances are very much in line with the other local authorities in the area, and in particular places similar, but not the same as Exeter, like Gloucester. And so we would recommend that you remain tied to the local government pay award. Problem with that has been, of course, that in the last 2 years, it hasn't been a percentage award, it's been a lump sum, which makes it sort of a little more complicated. But your finance people have worked out what the average would be in Exeter, and that's the 4%, which is contained within those figures. So we would recommend that you remain on that side. Just one small thing on the employer's national insurance. The Chancellor's reduction to the threshold to 5,000 brings all of your councillors now in to an employer's requirement for the NI, which will probably add, I can only tell from another local authority that I do this for, it's about between 18 and 20,000 pounds of extra cost. But your budget here at Exeter, you always allow for all the posts to be occupied by individual members of council, while in fact, many of them have dual-headed posts. And so your budget for the year is well within that figure and can adopt that figure. But an interesting side effect of the Chancellor's, which I don't think was thought about in any way at all, but on that side. The only thing I would take up to you is that we were surprised that your carers allowances that you have, which are very good and certainly in line with others, you have a very, very small take up, I think possibly even nil in the last year or so. And we wonder whether you should bring that to the attention of councillors, and more importantly, would-be councillors, that those allowances are there. Because, you know, we want to encourage as wide a people as possible to stand as councillors. We suggest that you have a full review next year. We haven't done a full review of the responsibilities, etc., for some time. Probably after COVID, actually. We did that during COVID and after COVID. So we would recommend that during next year that we do a full review, which we will invite all councillors if they wish to talk to the panel. And also, we thought perhaps it would be quite a good idea to ask those councillors who are not standing for election in May whether they would like to speak to the panel. Are they leaving for reasons that the panel should be aware of, sort of thing? Don't know that they are, but I think it would be useful to do that. And we'd also would perhaps like to speak to some of the new councillors, assuming there aren't new councillors elected in May, what their feelings are about the allowances and how that goes. And we also want to look at responsibilities again. Has and will devolution change any of those responsibilities and levels of work? So I think it would be a good idea to do a full review next year. Other than that, I've got nothing else to add.
Thank you, Derek. Just to say, happily, the City Council has no elections, so you may be waiting a long time.
Sorry, I forgot.
Yes, it's okay. It's not a problem.
I thought you have 1/3 every year, but you don't.
You do.
It's counted.
Divide thirds into fours. Anyway, never mind.
Never mind.
You have to do your maths, Derek.
Thank you.
We rely on you to do the maths well, by the way. And just to remark, I'm not so sure we're similar to other authorities such as Gloucester, but they may be similar to us.
Indeed.
Right. So, members, I'll throw this one open. If anybody got any comments or observations, Councillor Wood.
I'd just like to thank Derek and the team for carrying out the work, because it's a voluntary role, and it's not an easy role to work out, and we rely on the independence of the remuneration panel to see fair play carried out. So thank you.
Okay, yes, and I would like to add our thanks to that, Derek. It's not an easy job, and it's a difficult one for us to consider this always when you're dealing with your own sort of allowances. It's somewhat difficult.
I would say, if I may, it's much easier in this level of authority than another one which I chair. You work far better together, which is very good.
I will be quoting you on several occasions going forward, Derek, on that issue. Leaders of the opposition, is there anything you want to say? Councillor Mitchell.
Just a point to follow up. I think it might be helpful if Derek did look into this at the end of 2025 cycle, but also to involve former councillors who might wish to do a survey of them who've left the authority in the last 2 years. Because it was interesting to note in the annual public statement of accounts that was published, there's a picture of the whole council in 22-23. 10 of them are no longer with us. That's almost a quarter of the council. So we are getting a high turnover, and whether the factors you mentioned or anything playing into that situation, I think it would be useful, as you say, next year to do that survey so we're ready in 26 for that cycle of elections.
Yeah. But you're not suggesting we do away with democracy, right?
No, not at this moment, no.
I just wondered if that was all. But yes,
Yeah.
And the only question that we would be asking is it a financial reason why they're no longer, whether or not they like me or dislike somebody else is not a matter of relevance. It would for Derek to decide. It would be whether or not they find things like allowances is a hindrance to them because they may have a job, because there's not that many industries, like I came from the railway and bus industry and lots of those institutions, whereby one you had something like 36 days you were allowed for this sort of business, and many of those employers used to give a lot of time and give you allow you time to do all these things. And it's like being Lord Mayor. I would ask you to speak to the Lord Mayors and former Lord Mayors as to their role, because many of them, if they're in work, they have a problem with getting time off and getting paid, if you understand what I mean. So that, I think that's quite important. But yes, we will continually look at it, but we need to do this 4-yearly review as per the paper says. So if we're okay with that, I'm going to put this to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show.
Unanimous, Chair, that has been carried.
Thank you. So we now, as I reported earlier, move right on to item 13, which is we've got Jeff here to talk to us about the review of the polling districts and polling places within Exeter City Council area. And here, Jeff, there are 3 recommendations. Would you like to tell us briefly about the paper?
Thank you, Chair. Members will have seen the paper. I don't propose to expand on it too much. I'm hoping you'll see it as read, but I'm quite happy to take questions should anybody have any.
Thank you very much. Okay, members of the executive, any questions or contributions? Councillor Fold.
Thank you, Chair. Jeff, historically, Alphington, which I represent, had 4 polling stations. That was reduced a couple of elections ago to 3 when St Andrew's Church was taken out of the equation. That was already the area that produced the lowest number of votes. We were concerned that that would continue to be the case, or that it might even go lower. Was there any talk of reintroducing a 4th polling station for Alphington?
Okay, thank you, Bob. I'll take all the questions at the end, Jeff, if you can try and remember them. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Similarly, it's a question about the polling stations within my own ward, which is Pinhoe. It was fairly recently the polling station for HA was moved to Exeter Harriers Athletic Club, which is a significant journey with the railway in between for most of the voters within HA. So I'm just wondering if you've noticed a significant drop in the numbers engaging with the democratic process because of that change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Jeff, before I come to the opposition leaders and ask you to respond, it may help if you could explain, because we've had a couple and we may get another one, questions about specific areas. How do you start this ball rolling? Do you just come up with it, or do you actually say to councillors, look, we're looking at this, this is what we're thinking, what are you thinking? Have you got any remarks about that sort of stuff? And that would be interesting. And as for the information about voting numbers, Councillor, I do believe that political parties can access some of this information through the normal channels, if you understand me, and you could ask those questions. So, Councillor Moore.
Thank you for your report, Jeff. I was interested to see that Sylvania Hall in Mincing Lake is closed. So just an observation, but just wanted to alert you to feedback that I had about St David's Community Centre. Quite a number of people had difficulty finding the entrance around the back, and I just wondered if they might be able to go through the front door, like the Romanian elections this weekend. So I just wondered if that's something you might look into. And I was also quite interested in the equality impact assessment document. There's no mention made in any in relation to disability access, which I thought might be a significant issue in terms of access to polling stations. So I wondered if you might be able to comment on that, please.
Okay, Jeff, we're getting very nuanced into local, if you can deal with them. But what I would like to hear from you presently is how we are going to consult and discuss it with councillors We haven't got any city elections. We have got county council elections, by the way, so some of those probably be the same. Whereas it would come as to ward councillors, so we've got a bit of a year. I'd like to hear what you may say to us about how you're going to let us know it's coming up, and so we don't have this situation afterwards, everybody saying, oh, well, this, that, and the other, a process before, so we can get it right when we come back to this next review. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a very much a chicken and egg process because we're often driven by the availability of polling stations, and therefore the polling districts are kind of built around that. If you lose a polling station, then if you can't find one within the actual existing polling district, then you have to make an amendment such as we did in Alphington, where we just ran out of places to go, basically. If you remember, we used 7 stars, but we did that, I think, from memory, a couple of elections, but they turfed us out, was a long and short of it. They didn't really want to engage with that any further, so we were left with the option of unfortunately moving everybody to Westex school. So that's the situation in Alphington, which is purely driven by availability of venues. So in terms of consultation, if we have a situation like that, we do contact the sitting councillors and ask them their thoughts about what we, if they can come up with it, because they obviously know the area significantly better than I do. So we ask those questions first, if that is the case. If there's nothing that springs up or is particularly obvious about that area, then clearly we would look at that polling station first and decide about that in those terms. So we just have to remind me what the other question was, please, Chair.
HA,
Mid-Lake Harriers, yes. I haven't really noticed any particular decline in turnout at those polling stations. It's very difficult to define that from election to election because of the various issues that there may be politically or however it is. But certainly we had a fairly good turnout at that polling station recently. So I haven't really noticed any appreciable decline in turnout.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So there are the yes, yes. Could you answer Councillor Moore's if you can,
Community
quickly?
centre and the disability issue on the EQ.
Oh, yeah, certainly, yes. So we can certainly look into changing the access at St David's. That has been an issue, and for some reason the community centre managers didn't want us accessing the front of the building. Actually, the front of the building has, as far as I can recollect, steps to it, which are quite.
Well,
Not
they
the
want to get into each polling station here all night.
No, but the long and short of it is we can do those. Yeah.
So when I move this up the full council meeting, I'm going to make sure that I say to the councillors, look, you know your wards, you should know them. If you think you've got anything now, this is the time. Raise it now. Don't wait until the last moment. Please raise it if you've got any issues about access or these sorts of things. Ask your questions now to give you a fighting chance on all of these things. I have dealt with everything, councillor. Will this affect the recommendation?
I'm sorry, I thought you were going to bring portfolio holders in.
Okay,
And
if you
I'll
if you can help, yes, please.
Thank you. Quickly, yes, I was just reiterating what you've said. Also to say that yes, ward councillors are always contacted about a polling station specific to their ward, and there was a review which went to all councillors. But this paper is actually not about polling stations. It's specifically about changing a boundary to include a new polling station that was used last year because of Sylvania being closed. So I was just going to say that's the focus for the recommendation.
Thank you for saving us from going down that particular rabbit hole, but I think we will make it clear to councillors, if you've got some thoughts, please don't sit on it until the last moment. Bring it forward now, because we've got opportunity even for next May, albeit the county council elections, to try to influence some of that. So we'll make that clear to people about access. So those are the recommendations. I'm going to move it from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? Okay, all those in favour of the recommendations, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you very much, Mark. We now revert back to the agenda, and we now come on to item 7, which is the review of the corporate risk register. And here we have a recommendation that we actually it's a resolve matter. It says that the executive committee and proposes to cancel any necessary actions. Yes, it's a resolved matter, and so therefore I'll ask you, Dave Hodgson, to speak to it, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is quarterly update of the corporate risk register. The risk register has been reviewed and updated by Strategic Management Board in conjunction with their portfolio holders and was considered last week at the Audit and Governance Committee. Just to update members of the executive, there was a suggestion, a helpful suggestion, that directors include the date when an update is being made so that members are aware of which is the most up-to-date statement within the risk register. This is something that we will commit to doing from now on. Happy to take any questions.
Yes, and before I open it up to the members of the executive, indeed, I had a very good meeting with Adrian, the new director, but in his former role, and he's given me a good paper in relation to a number of assets. And what we're deciding to do is to follow up on what was asked, not just the city wall, but the other assets will be mentioned. So Adrian will produce his own risk register that he will bring to me in his report, and then this will be included within where we need to make sure that we identify the problems with all of them. It's a very good paper, and I think this aids me in my portfolio. So other members of the executive, would you like to make a comment on the risk register or your elements of it, please?
Thank you very much. I've got 2 very quick points. Firstly, I'm afraid it's an admin point, but I've brought it up before and it still hasn't changed. Page 46, please could, where it says deputy leader responsible for culture, could that be changed to Councillor Bob Fole, please? Because it's still saying me. Page 50, just like to flag up the fact this is a new thing on the risk register about cyber risk, and I'm very pleased that the director responsible for that has involved me in discussion, and so that I've been aware that that's coming forward as now seen as a risk, as it is for all councils. Cyber risk is a real thing, but there are appropriate mitigations in place which will be talked about at a later date. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Just to highlight within my own portfolio, which it's on page 34, and part of the movement since the last time this report was presented is the formal confirmation of Sports England funding to 2027 through the New Place Partnership, which is a significant commitment by Sports England in recognition of the work of the council.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other Councillor Visit?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and also just to draw attention to an area of my portfolio and a couple of updates, one of which is that the submission for the PSDS, that's Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme 4, has gone in at the beginning of last week, and we think it's a very strong case, and very targeted and extremely well written proposal. So thank you to officers for their time and efforts on that, and we wait to see
in January the outcome of that. But that I think demonstrates that despite the setbacks of the previous funding that was agreed and we received and weren't able to progress further with, we are still very much on pushing forward to try and work to decarbonise Riverside. So that we will wait to see the outcome of, but feel is a very strong application. And the other item, which has now gone out of my head, was... Oh, I just also, yes, in terms of the citywide net zero activity, lots going on there, and it's great that we now have a dedicated member of staff whose job it is to reach out and is doing great work on that. So an awful lot going on, and has also helped, that member of staff has also helped put together through George Marshall the response from this city council to Devon County Council's transport consultation, which is a pretty strong proposal submission. We feel they should be going further than they are to try and mitigate some of the impacts and where we know we need to see change, particularly around transport. So some good things going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else of the executive? Okay, opposition leaders, Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Leader. As I was a member of the A&G, obviously won't go with the points we raised there, but it does raise two process issues, I think, in regard to this new work effectively that you're undertaking. One is A&G only met a matter of a few days ago. So does the council need to consider sequencing so that you actually get the report from A&G to consider as portfolio holders, rather than relying on Dave's excellent memory or any notes he's had from the meeting? That's one. And the second point is, as at the previous meeting, the recommendation has effectively two elements. And the second element is one, I don't know, we're beginning to flesh out, or you're beginning to flesh out with feedback from your portfolio holders tonight, is about proposing any necessary actions. And I'm just wondering how, as leader, you fit that in to the meeting agenda to ensure that you actually are discussing potential actions, or whether we get a written report from the portfolio holders or whatever, or saying no action required on this at this meeting. So we do consider it, or else we alter the recommendation in future. That's all.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, and it's good to hear the portfolio holder updates. Thank you. And so, do I take it that RAM will be remaining on the risk register in terms of actually not being included in the bid for the public sector decarbonisation scheme? And I'd be interested to know from the portfolio holder around intermediate targets to get to net zero 2030, given that we haven't had an update on carbon emissions for the city since the 21 figures, which were the same as the 29 figures. So, you know, what is the budget, carbon budget that you're planning in terms of mitigating this risk? Thank you.
Okay, dealing with the process, we'll have a look at the process, whether or not A&G fits in line with everything, but we'll also look at it. I attended the meeting. My long-term memory is still quite okay at the moment, Councillor, and we will try to deal with things. I don't want to wait on things if I can help with it. If we can make some important changes, or changes that are relevant and make sense, why wouldn't we want to do it? As for detailed questions about net zero and all of that, well, the other things I was going to say, we do reports, Councillor Mitchell, that comes to scrutiny and everything, and I'm not seeing this document as a document whereby allows all that to manifest itself. So if you've got some specific questions on net zero, please write to us, let us know. We'll try to get you those answers. And if they need to be put somewhere at the relevant meetings on agenda items, we'll make sure that they're discussed where they can be discussed in a forum which would be debating it. We are just here to note the corporate risk register, note the mitigations, and I get what you said, Councillor Mitchell, and we'll look at all of that. And so that's how I would want us to proceed with all of that. So on that point, Dave, there's nothing else to say, is there? You've got the recommendation, which is a resolved matter for executive. All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Yep, and seconded by councillor Wright.
Oh, just better add that.
So we now move on to item 8, which is the overview of the general fund review budget 24-25, quarter 2. This is 5 recommendations here for council. Dave will talk us through, but I would draw your attention, executive, that it's the supplementary budgets and the budget transfers that are detailed in paragraph 8, 9 and appendix 3, which we are approving tonight effectively amongst all the others that you do. David.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the half-yearly update and projection of the outturn position for the general fund. Just to draw your attention to some key points within the report. So in section 8.2 on page 56, we've outlined the outcome from a financial point of view of the restructure of the senior leadership of the council. You'll recall that the proposal projected a reduction in costs of 388,000, whilst during this financial year there's some interim arrangements in place going forward from 2024-25. We're projecting that it will deliver 389,000, so bang on target. In terms of the rest of the outturn position, actually very similar to quarter 1. So a couple of areas of concern around commercial property income. That looks to be a one-off relating to bad debt coming into the equation and having to be taken out of the income for this financial year. That hopefully will be addressed with the new arrangements we've got in place, and the new interim head of service is prioritising that. And the second area is temporary accommodation, which is still showing signs of challenge. As members are aware, this is a national problem, not just limited to Exeter. And thirdly, planning income remains a challenge, albeit 1 or 2 large applications would address a significant proportion of that. As the leader quite rightly says, importantly, we're asking council to approve supplementary budgets. In this case, it's actually a reduction in budget, with the money being transferred to an earmark reserve relating to the staffing for Household Support Fund. So we have the staff in place, and they are very, very busy dealing with applications as we speak. But we can transfer some of that money forward. As you're aware, there's been a further Household Support Fund being announced for next year, and therefore we will be looking to continue and continue with those staff. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Members of the executive, any questions, points, clarifications you would like to draw out? Councillor Vizard.
Just a comment, really, and very much welcome the income we're seeing from the CCTV monitoring service, which I think when we first set out our ambitions on CCTV, we thought this is another hit for the council in terms of cost, and indeed we sort of took that hit initially. So it's welcome that it's really working well, and uptake on that service is increasing, and notwithstanding the stresses on the home call alarm service, which are noted as well. Just wanted to welcome that. Thank you.
Just to say, indeed, and we've all been emailed for our annual visit or triannual visit, how often you go, 2-3 years, to the CCC centre. I think it's very interesting to take a move up there. Is there anybody else who'd like to ever say? Councillor Wood, then Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just highlighting within the report, it mentions a £200,000 underspend reported in the asset maintenance budget for leisure and sport. And just to highlight that doesn't mean that our centres are brand spanking new and highly up to spec. That's actually just the way that the finances is managed internally. there is still significant work required on a number of our premises, and so we still have some headaches to solve. It is old stock, old asset buildings that require a lot of maintenance, some more than others, of course. SSP is looking great. Others need a little bit more work.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Just also wanted to pull out a bit about the RAM, the museum service savings because of energy efficiencies, which were brought about by the energy consultant, and savings in utility budget. So even though we know the RAM is one of the big ticket things to look at for energy savings, it's already really getting down there. I just wanted to ask a question. Was that part of the energy consultant review there? Was that part of the other project, the decarbonisation project?
Right, come on to that.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just under the waterways underspend, page 58, it mentions that we've got historic vacancy underspending within engineering with the presently unoccupied waterways engineer post. We've just filled that 3 days a week starting in January, so that's really good news. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's nobody else. Just before we come on to the leaders, this has gone to scrutiny, which I think that's what we did. I think that was good. It went to scrutiny to allow the scrutiny committee to have a look at this report and quiz you on these things as well, Dave. Leaders, Councillor Mitchell.
Just 3 specific points from the report, if Dave could provide some clarification. Under the parking services, there's a reference there to where we rezoned some car parks, therefore increase the prices. That's had a detrimental effect on the business rates. At what stage do we get to a situation where, in fact, we'll actually make more money reducing some car parking charges by saving money on business rates, or isn't that an issue at this stage? Secondly, on the unapportionable overheads, you're talking of a figure of 771,000, which is a pension strain payments. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I'd love to suffer some of that. Pension strain payments of 771,000. And lastly, in regard to planning services, which is showing a net overspend of 200,000 at this stage, and income down by 450,000, but an underspend on Exeter plan of $250,000. What impact, if any, has our charging for pre-application advice benefited the planning department so far, or do you anticipate during the year? That's all. Thank you.
Okay, but no questions on the recommendations as such. Right, okay. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. I'm just interested in an area which is identified in the report but not flagged as an area of risk. So, which is about the food waste rollout, and the fact that next year we won't be eligible for a portion of the Devon County Council share scheme, which leaves an unachievable future target of 280,000, which needs addressing. So how do we think we might address that? When will the food waste service be rolled out? Will it be rolled out in time for that? And just in relation to the agency staff, that's expected to be lower. Last year it was 300,000. Are we moving towards being able to fill holidays and changes in personnel within our own staff team, or will we still have a heavy reliance on agency staff? Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jobson.
It's really just with relation to the MRF, which is at the bottom of page 57, but the paragraph is on 58. Just wondered if there was any more detail available about the use of the secondary reclamation facilities. We all know about the site. Just wondered if that's getting worse while we wait for the new MRF to be constructed. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I've picked up there's no points with regard to the supplementary budgets or what it is, but it's more questions of detail, which I know you've had a further chance of reading the report. We prefer a lot of these would come to scrutiny. That would allow us then to come after. But in relation to the food waste and all that, just to say, I don't know if you've been looking up, because you were at that meeting with me. We've had a meeting with Adrian Bengali to talk about this. There are some issues around which we're addressing, and it may be appropriate that I feel sure a number of councillors would like to know how this is progressing, what is happening. We are doing some work on it, so it may be a question whereby we need to have a councillor's briefing, so a number of these things can come up, and to explain where we are on all of this, because a lot of work is going on, and I know Adrian and Simon and the team are hitting the ground. So I really don't want to get into a scrutiny meeting here this evening. We've got some recommendations to endorse, change, or otherwise. I don't think any of those points changes any way that we would influence our decision on all of that, but just to assure people that we would be looking to do something with a members' briefing on the food waste and some of those things. Okay, good nod in that right direction. So there we are. Is the portfolio?
No, not the portfolio. Sorry, Jeff, I just wondered about the answer from Dave about the decarbonisation.
Yes,
Decarbonisation. Yes, sorry. Trying to move it on too fast.
The energy review, I believe, was set up to the decarbonisation scheme, so it was something that managements basically themselves to look at their energy basically to optimise their energy use.
sorry. Okay, so there we have 5 recommendations on item 8. I'm going to move it from the chair. Can I second it? All those in favour of the recommendation?
As you know, Mr. Chair, that
Thank
has
you.
been carried.
So now move on to item 9, which is the General Fund Capital Monitoring Statement, Quarter 2. There are 2 recommendations, and here we are. There's further funding requests in 8.6. David.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is the half-yearly update of the capital programme, projecting spend in the financial year. And if you just bear with me, I apologise, I've gone too far. So, in terms of overall performance, the council has spent Council has spent 2.899 million thus far, which equates to about 12% of the revised capital programme, compared with 5.22% in the preceding year. I haven't really got much to say other than to highlight, as you have the further funding requests, so Disabled Facilities Grant, in addition to the existing budget for Disabled Facilities Grant, which is funded from external grants, as you know, and then a request for an additional £100,000 for Topsham Museum. As the work progresses, it's uncovered some unforeseen additional structural issues that need addressing, and therefore we're requesting additional funding that will be funded from borrowing. And then thirdly, another request for a harbour workboat. This one is the workboat that supports the mooring repair service that's provided, and also does the essential job of maintaining our own buoys in the river. It's anticipated that this will be funded from capital receipts as soon as sufficient capital receipts are available. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dave. So there it is, 8.6. So members of the executive, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. It's just to add to the comments that Dave's just made about the waterways boat, that there is a paper coming to executive with detail of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just good to see that there's a way of supporting Topshire Museum. Sorry, wrong word, technically. Here, I know it's a further budgetary request, but as you know, that's a very old building built with cob walls and lots of structure stuff. But it's such an important thing for the people of Topsham and wider as well. So very much supportive of that. Thank you.
Councillor Fowle.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just reiterate what Councillor Laura Wright has just said about the Topsham Museum? I went there earlier this year and enjoyed a very nice cream tea, and the facilities were fantastic. When I went back last month, I was delighted to see that it was almost unrecognisable because it was covered in scaffolding and vital work was taking place. So I'm delighted to see that.
Thank you. Any other member of the executive? Just to say that also the disabled facilities grants are very important, and I think we should encourage more people to take, particularly private sector, to, when I say private sector, I mean residents with private households, to take up that thing. I know we publicise it, but it's very, very important that we help their quality of life in their homes. Leaders. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. If I'm pleased to see the Topsham Museum request there, but maybe you could clarify, Dave. You said this will be funded by borrowing, and I thought we weren't borrowing any more money. So is this work on hold until that is coming through? And my second point is, I note that the landfill gas extraction system is postponed for the moment, and boreholes are being monitored. Will we get a report on the methane emissions from that landfill extraction system and any remedial works to be done to actually try and remove methane from being emitted?
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. On page 82, there's reference to the Guildhall Shopping Centre enhancement deferral of just over 4.9 million. In the light of discussions the council are having at the moment internally and externally in regard to the Civic Centre and the Guildhall, is it likely that that enhancement will have to be halted and take part in a larger scheme if the council were to move to the site?
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so some of those are relevant for our information, particularly the last one. If you could help us quickly with those few questions that have been raised.
Thank you, Chair. So when I say borrowing, that means an increase in our capital financing requirement. What's on hold is physically going out and long-term borrowing from the PWLB. So we are capable of doing that either through short-term borrowing or using our own cash reserves to make the payments. So it's absolutely not on hold. It will continue. And if it was all spent in this financial year, there would be an increase in our capital financing requirement, which is what we make our repayment of debt on. But what we're on hold for is physically going out and locking in taxpayers to a 50-year loan to back that. So we're currently borrowing, and I'll talk more about that in the Treasury Management Strategy. No, that's borrowing on hold for Topsham Museum. I can't answer the question on landfill extraction, I'm afraid, anyway. But in terms of the enhancements to the Guildhall Shopping Centre, this is a budget to enable us to fulfil our landlord obligations when new tenants come in. This is not a budget to support us moving to the Guildhall Shopping Centre. That will be, as promised, a separate report and a separate request for funding from a separate pot of money if we if you choose to go down that path. So this is entirely separate to that.
Thank you. So we're supporting the the overall position, and also 8.6, the request for the 3 funding, which have now been explained. Thank you for that, Dave, for that. So I'm going to move those from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you very much. Now move on to item 10, which is the 24-25 HRA Budget Monitoring Report Quarter 2. And again, this has been to a scrutiny committee, and there are some, we need to, in the HRA capital programme, to reflect some of the reported variations in detailed in Appendix 4. And perhaps if you'd like to draw our attention to some of those issues, because that's what we're deciding here tonight, David. Thank you.
So thank you, Chair. Again, this is the half-yearly update for the housing revenue account. Extremely similar to quarter 1 in that, as members will be aware, we're taking a more proactive approach to repairs and maintenance in the housing revenue account, and therefore we're identifying more repairs earlier and addressing those, and this has caused that budget to overspend, but not to the extent that it's causing revisions to the rest of the budget in this year. We will look to address and put a fuller budget into future years for that. In terms of the changes, they're set out to the capital programme. They're set out in the report and more clearly in Appendix 4, which highlights some of the deferrals, moving some of the funding to future years. This is a normal part of the capital programme, just as it is for the general fund. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you.
David, it's quite detailed in there. Councillor Asvashin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you mentioned there that we've got some changes because, and I just want to clarify, that's because we're being more proactive rather than reactive in our repairs. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on the HRA budget? Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Leader. Just to recognise, I think, as has been said, looking at tackling things before they become a problem is brilliant. But I also looking at the closure now of the Wren's house. Clearly, there were significant maintenance issues and costs involved in keeping that habitable. But I just wanted to put on record that I do know some people who have been moved out of Wren's, and just to really thank the teams there for making that move as good as it can be. Moving somebody's home is always challenging, but the homes that they've now moved to, one in Brook House, is amazing. A fantastic improvement in the accommodation that we provide for them. So just wanted to go on record thanking the teams for making what is a very positive outcome easier for them to go through. So just wondering, in terms of impact on the budget, what will be the outfall, if you like, from not having to keep Wren's house habitable? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else from the executive? Leaders. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Yes, I think the issue of the repairs is really important, and a proactive approach and we support. But can we just be reassured that nobody will have to wait until the new financial year to have repairs done because of budgetary pressures?
Thank you. Anybody else? I'm not sure I can give that assurance, carte blanche, to be quite honest. Dave, can you give the assurance?
So what I can say, so first of all, if we talk about then over the medium term, absolutely there will be a significant reduction from not maintaining a challenging tall building. But in the short term, obviously, whilst it's still standing, we have security and other costs associated with that. I'm pleased to say we've been successful in getting funding to demolish the building, but we have to work with the telecom operators who have masts on top to ensure they're properly moved prior to being able to demolish that. In terms of repairs and maintenance, this is an out-term projection, so it's not saying as at today we are £1.4 million overspent and therefore you must stop all spend. It's our projection of where we'll be at the end of the financial year, and therefore has been built in. It's not our intention at this moment in time to say you need to stop.
Thank you, David. Okay, we've got two recommendations here, which also notes the capital programme reported variations in Appendix 4. I'm going to move that from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you, Mark. And now move on to item 11, which is the Treasury Management 24-25 half-yearly update. David.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the normal 6-monthly update on our Treasury Management position, a statutory report that we have to produce for you. This year, however, we also have a proposal to Council for the adoption of a Treasury Management Environmental, Social and Governance policy, as was requested via scrutiny, I believe. So a policy has been drafted and is attached as an appendix. Alongside that, just to confirm that the Council has disinvested from Barclays, so we no longer have any funds with Barclays. In terms of our overall strategy, as Councillor Moore alluded to earlier, we're proposing to run down our cash balances to save us from having to undertake long-term borrowing. Over the next 6 months, it's anticipated that we will have to take out some short-term borrowing to maintain our cash position. But we've built that into our projections and our future budgets going forward. So in overall terms, we're on track for both the HRA and the general fund in terms of anticipated interest, costs and income, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Members of the executive. Councillor Vizard.
Thank you very much. Just to welcome the Environmental, Social and Governance Policy Edition. I think that's extremely helpful and the right thing to do going forward. I think it signals our intentions and principles very wisely and very well, and very good news on Barclays disinvestment, which we've heard at the scrutiny meeting. So just to welcome the additions to those, and hopefully that will remain the case going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Leader. Just wondering if Dave could give a little bit of explanation around bullet point or item 6 around the legal aspects of balancing investments that would be driven by our political positioning, as they have to also land within guidance that we have to adhere to as a council. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Dave, that is important because on page 119, Appendix A, which is the Environmental, Social and Governance Policy, ESG, and there's a couple of other acronyms in there like SLY, Security, Liquidity and Yield. It reminds me very much of when I dealt with a lot of pension trustees with the Statement of Investment Principles, and this is basically part of that. Is there, because it talks about on page 119, following up what Councillor Wood said, about the security, liquidity, and yield core principles. Is there any way that we could, I don't know, is there a sheet, is there a policy on all of that, so we can measure all that? Because I understand we have to take that into account, but it's nice to know what we are taking it into account, because environmental, social, and governance, these are all important issues to us. If you can give a bit of response to that presently. Anybody else from the executive? No, I didn't see any leaders. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I really welcome this report. This is a really important step for the council, so I'm really excited to see this. Who would thought I would say that about a Treasury Management report? But it is really important. And I wonder if the council will be actually closing its account with Barclays and transferring to another bank. And I think you raised some good points, Leader, because I think it's really important that these principles are framed within legal commitments. So I was interested that the environmental principle doesn't specifically reference climate change, given our national legal requirement to reach net zero by 2050. And in respect of the social element, human rights is a very broad term. So, does that relate to international legislation? Do we have to take that into account? And obviously there's been this debate in the county council about exposure of investments in banks or funds which then invest in companies which manufacture arms or components to sell to countries where acts of genocide are suspected or being investigated or are considered plausible by the International Criminal Court. So I think we have to be very clear about where we sit as a public authority in terms of our legal obligations, both locally, nationally and internationally. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you. I know it's in reference to what was said, because my question was about section 6, the last paragraph of which relates to what we can and can't do within the framework that's set for us. And the last sentence in that bullet point says, but climate change cannot displace the SLY principles. So it's actually within the papers. It's unfortunate it's been raised, but it is in the papers.
Thank you for answering that question for me. It is highlighted on my page. I knew that would come up, and I knew the answer is. But I think we need to get those core principles, and of course, I don't want to get into divesting of funds, because as Dave pointed out at the scrutiny, we do not invest in equities as such, where it's a mishmash of stuff and you can't trace it all, which is very, very difficult to do. But Dave's given us the assurance. I'm happy with that. Do we or don't we need to close that account? I mean, is it? I suppose we on about the ethical ways in which we invest, as opposed to the ethical attitude of the people we invest with. I don't know if that's going to be a part of it, because I mean, it's very difficult for me to find a cup of coffee, because I don't go to Starbucks because they don't pay taxes here. I've got to be careful that you start eliminating too many, we'll end up having nowhere to go, Dave. So what is the situation there?
Thank you. So they're all really good points and kind of highlight the challenge in this area. So to be absolutely clear, your legal responsibilities are to consider security, liquidity and yield in your treasury management. But we can put a framework around that will help to support decision making within treasury management, so that you basically choose the most appropriate products in line with your ESG policy first. Now, in certain circumstances, and this is really important, we need about £15 million cash close to hand, i.e. not with other local authorities for a set amount of time, just to ensure that we can effectively manage your cash flow, and therefore we need to put it in products that are quickly available. We generally have a counterparty limit of between £3 and £5 million. So we need at least 3 products in addition to our own bank account. What the ESG policy will do, however, is identify the best products to use to meet the ESG policy. But we will still have to be minded to those organisations that meet your counterparty requirements to use as a potential backstop in the potential event that we get more money than we were anticipating in a short period of time. But that is all. If adopted, this ESG will drive the way that we determine how to place that money.
Okay, Deb, I just want to follow that up. Does that mean you're going to bring us some sort of framework to consider?
So
because you talked about it, and if I can just go on, you've said about how we invest. So, you know, I mean, where do we end? Do we check with the authorities that we put our money, short-term money, whether or not they've got money with Barclays or similar? If you see what I mean? Because if an authority does, then we shouldn't be putting money there, should we? And so when we talk about doing all of this, I mean, we don't normally, they aren't normally political decisions. I've never, as leader or when I was on the executive or as my time as a councillor, somebody's come to me and said, right, Phil, we've got this and we're going to invest in this and we're going to invest in that. They used to, when I was a trustee, is that what you're saying that we're going to do? Or you follow the principles and you invest? Do you see what I'm trying to say? I mean, don't think we should be involved to that sort of micro detail of doing the job of the finance team.
So you have more power than you realise. So every year we set a treasury management strategy with a counterparty list that complies with that strategy that council approves, and we can't do anything outside of that. What we will look to do for February, you do it in February alongside the budget setting. What we will look to do is try and identify those products that sit within your ESG policy and those that sit without.
Thank you, Dave. Sorry to go on that, but this is a sensitive issue which we're all becoming sort of more concerned about, quite rightly so, on where the money goes. So we've got a couple of recommendations there. I'm going to move them from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you. Now move on to item 12, which is the City Point update. And the recommendation is to resolve this matter. And I'm coming first to Ian and then Dave on this matter. That's what it says on my sheet anyway.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's just going to be myself, but Dave's also here to answer questions. So this report updates on the City Point site and also proposes some next steps to bring forward comprehensive redevelopment. It's also discussing some potential temporary meanwhile uses for the former bus station site, but recognising that at the moment the City Council hasn't identified a budget for that. The City Council's long-term ambition is to enable comprehensive regeneration of this strategically important site in the city centre. That could take several years, so it's also important to look at bringing forward some temporary and meanwhile uses, and there is opportunities there on the former bus station site, which the City Council owns outright and has full control. Back in 2019, officers reported on a potential partnership with the Crown Estate and its joint venture partner, Naveen, for a comprehensive mixed-use development, including a new civic hub and commercial office space. A lot has changed since 2019, including notably the council's own accommodation requirements, which means that it's no longer looking to develop a new civic hub. Also, the arrangement that was being discussed with the Crown Estate wasn't viable and presented too much risk for the City Council. Time's moved on. Very recently, the Fraser Group has taken over the long-term lease of the Paris Street, Sidwell Street parts of the site from Crown, and officers have had some very early discussions with representatives of the Fraser Group. So City Point remains a key development opportunity and priority, and it is identified in the emerging Exeter plan, which we'll be discussing later this evening, for a mix of uses, including homes, employment, and as a gateway to the city centre. So officers would now like to explore the potential of the site, undertake some market research, talk with interested parties, and look to bring forward some options which can be brought back to executive early next year. Officers will also evaluate the condition of the former bus station site with the potential to look at meanwhile uses. The potential to use the upper deck as a temporary car park is being looked at and could fund future meanwhile uses and contribute also towards other City Council priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Ian's explained what this paper is doing. There's a lot of discussion around it, everyone, about what it should be doing, what should doing, and just bearing in mind what 2.3 and 2.4 of the recommendations are asking us to support. Ian has explained that it's going out for those discussions and it will bring back early next year. So if we could not say, I'd like to see a market on a Tuesday afternoon or a Thursday afternoon, or you'd like this and you like that, there will be a discussion around all of that. So we're really asking the officers to go out and to do that. So rather not to go into that detail at this particular meeting. So members, I now open it up to you all. Councillor Wright, then Councillor Oak.
Thank you very much, Chair. And bearing in mind what you said, the two sort of key recommendations here are 2.3 and 2.4 really. Could I just ask some clarification, please, from Ian, because those two recommendations are dovetailing, obviously, but I'm just wondering if one excludes the other. So 2.3, officers working with potential development partners, and then 2.4, commissioning a market insight report to look at delivery options for the land within the council's control. So is that two separate things that the report would just look at the land that we own, but other work will be going on to look at what would those two things dovetail at some point?
Okay.
Councillor Oak.
Thanks. Yeah, another clarification question. For 2.3, the proposals that will be coming in early 2025, they for meanwhile use also longer term proposals.
Good point.
Anybody else on this point? Councillor Wood, then Councillor.
Thank you, Leader. It's good to hear formally that this paper lays out that it isn't going to be a permanent car park. It was never on the plans, but there was a bit of confusing coverage around that issue. And I think it's important to note that at the moment we don't have resources available for a meanwhile use. So I think it's the final solution, which is what this paper is looking at, the final solution for that plot of land is a long way off, and we do want to make effective meanwhile use of it. We need to resource that. So that's where the temporary car park proposal is coming in. So it's good to see that those stages are laid out and that there is final clarity that there never was and won't be a permanent car park there.
Although we've not even said it'd be a temporary one yet. Councillor Fall.
I'm glad you mentioned markets, Leader, because I attended a meeting of the Phoenix Arts Board last week, and they were expressing interest in this plot of land for possible pop-up theatre, buskers, and indeed markets. And I suggested they might be in touch with a certain Mr. Ian Collinson, with any thoughts and ideas that they had.
Thank you, Councillor Fallon, and I feel sure they will engage with all those things. Is there any other member of the executive? Okay, leaders. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Alcott, for asking one of my two questions about whether it was a long-term or short-term issues that we're going to get back at the next meeting in February. Could I just refer Ian and the others to paragraph 13.2, because we've talked about partnership arrangements, etc. And this seems to indicate a situation where we're unwilling to release land because we then lose control, etc. But if the private sector did wish to go ahead and wish to have elements of our land in their package, are we as a council willing to release elements of the land?
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. And thank you. Yes, it's good to hear reference back to the decision that you made about having a car park, whether it's long or short term. But I want to speak to recommendation 2.2, if I may. I'm quite disappointed that officers will be deciding. Councillor Voles just mentioned that there's interest potentially from the Phoenix, which is a good idea. And I think there should be an open call for ideas for this site. We did a call and it generated over 200 ideas. Some of those will be great ones, like markets. Others won't be viable at all. But actually, delegating this decision to officers doesn't give the community to come forward to come up with creative meanwhile uses for this site, or even contribute to the longer term. So I think it would be really great if there was a public call out for working with in partnership with the council, for the community or local businesses to be able to do that, so we can come to creative solution together. And given that this project is now really in a way going back to square one, I would like to know what is the status of the council's master plan for this site, particularly given that the council won't be moving on to the site. Thank you.
Anybody else? I just want to, because I don't want to put it out there that we're not going to be talking to people, we're not going to listen to people, we're not going to have people who are totally wrong. And, you know, I just, well, I know it's fallen on deaf ears, but I just plead with people not to do that. And so we will, but there is a sequential order in what we're trying to do here. First comes the report, then we will consider it. Then we will make some decisions as to how we go forward, and we're just not there yet. That is how I see all of this at this moment in time. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Leader. Just to say that officers would absolutely intend to develop proposals to come forward to members who might then decide to put it out for public consultation. But I think we'd have to accept that we probably could have worded that better. But absolutely, we would be bringing forward proposals and then be seeking members' input into how you want to take forward any consultation. Thank you, Chair.
And we will consult, and it was quite pleasing to see the consultation charter at the last scrutiny committee, and towards the end of it, did you see the number of consultations we've done over the years? So we do consult with people, and we will continue to do that. So I just want it known is nothing's being ruled in and nothing's being ruled out. I suppose you could be right about starting from scratch again. So I see that as an opportunity. And if there are some opportunities, we need to seize it. We've got an important space in the middle of our city. We have to think about it seriously and sensibly and engage all the interested stakeholders in what we're going to do going forward. But first, I have to hear from the officers. A mark in the ground need to be put, metaphorically, and then we start coalescing around some ideas and get out to consultation. So those are the recommendations before us. Can I have a seconder, please? Oh, yes, sorry, yeah. I am rushing here. There are two things and some clarifications. I got sent down a rabbit hole. So if you can do those couple of things and a clarification for Councillor Alcock and Councillor Wright, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the clarification questions. In relation to recommendations 2.3 and 2.4, they are separate processes, but they would go hand in hand. What I would say there, as well as by way of a comment, is that to bring forward complete comprehensive development of the whole site, it would need very close cooperation and collaboration with the Fraser Group. So in recognition of that, and the fact that for the former bus station site, the council has complete control of that we will be looking at the sort of market insight, market research, what is possible in any event. So there will be two processes, but they'll go together. I think the other question was about recommendation 2.3, and whether we're looking at the long-term proposals there. Yes, we are. That conversation is about the long-term comprehensive development for the reasons I've just said, because we would need to involve those parties if we were to look at that.
In that case, could I ask a supplementary follow-up, whatever? So just because I think it is important to understand if deciding on the meanwhile uses is being delegated to officer level or not. So do we have a sense of, are they coming back to, so to say, or will that be
well, just to say from a political point of view, I want to hear, absolutely, we need to go out to consult that. I'm not going to say I want my favourite ice cream shop over there or anything else like that. We've got to go out, we've got to, first of all, we've got to see who wants to come, and then we got to see what we can do, and of course we will. Yes, I can assure you of that, and we will be in the forefront of, at the end of that consultation process, and making those decisions. Would I be right in saying that? Okay, so we need to make the recommendation to make it a bit clearer. Develop ideas, whether or not meanwhile consider that we executive note the officers will develop a medium-term uses given consideration to. So I can understand them telling us about the money, and they need to tell us about that because they're telling me all the time we've got no money. So we want to make it clear that we will be developing ideas. Develop and bring forward ideas. Yeah. So on line 2, where it says develop and bring forward ideas for the site, giving consideration. I mean, I could go on and write another paragraph to say at which there's going to be consultation with everybody. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You can absolutely be assured that we will be talking to you at that time about any public consultation.
Absolutely. Want to make that well, that's in line with our charter, for goodness sake, isn't it? So we'd be going against our own policies. So we,
that's to insert the words bring forward ideas between develop and medium-term uses.
Yes.
2.2
for the site.
To develop and bring forward.
Medium-term uses following consultation. Following. Yeah, well, that's what we want to do. I can assure you, following consultation.
After we've had the so Chair, sorry to complicate things. So that the main point for clarification is that officers are going to bring forward proposals to members, ideas for meanwhile uses, as well as bringing forward our plans for consultation.
Yes.
I think we would want to speak to members first about ballpark thinking, and obviously looking at any possible resource implications before we also then invite views from the wider community.
Yeah, because I do follow, when I say excitement, maybe the wrong word, I do follow the interest of members to say there's an opportunity here, and we want to be, we've got some ideas, because I'll admit, no, we haven't got all the ideas, but we've got some ideas, they will say to us, and we want to support framing this. So here are these ideas, and we will always accept a good idea. So yes, if we can have those changes in accordance with that, we'll make sure the right papers come to council on all of this. But again, to assure the public, and thank you, Councillor Olcott, for bringing that again to our attention, we need to. So those are the recommendations before us. Well, if you've written it down, yes.
I'm just transferring it through. So
can you read it out for us?
So the meanwhile uses for the former bus station site will be considered, and that the executive note that officers will develop and bring forward ideas for medium-term uses of the sites that following consultation.
Well, not following, we didn't say.
As well as plans for.
As well as plans for consultation.
and given consideration to there being no financial resources at the current stage.
Yes, thank you. So that's the recommendation.
Have a seconder for the amendment.
We will get a seconder in a moment. Can we have a seconder, please? So there we are. So I'm moving it as amended, and it's been. So there we go. We got all the right elements now in the right order. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried as amended.
Thank you very much. Yes, that was an important item. So we now we've dealt with item 13. Oh God, that's nice. So we get on to item 14 now, which is the Exeter plan publication. I've got a written question from you, Councillor Mitchell, which I'll take once in a moment, but we got it and got your answer. Thank you for that. And that is helpful, by the way, very helpful. So we've got a number of recommendations here. One is there will be some resolved items and then recommended items which will go to council. So Ian, if you can explain to us what's happening.
Thank you, Chair. So this report explains the progress that's been made with the Exeter plan and seeks approval tonight from Executive to publish the Regulation 19 version of the plan for consultation. It's also noted as well a further recommendation for council to approve and then submit the plan to the planning inspectorate. That's under the constitution that we currently have. I will also highlight some of the important changes that have been made to the plan since it was last presented to you, particularly in relation to affordable housing and student housing. George Marshall is with me as well, and he will summarise very briefly some of the other key changes which might be of interest to members. So the Exeter plan has been in production now for about 4 years, including 3 full public consultations. The most recent was done on a full draft of the plan earlier this year. This version of the plan is the Regulation 19 version, and it's another key milestone in that process, and is in effect the final draft of the plan before it is submitted to the planning inspectorate for examination. In July 2024, the government announced a series of planning reforms, the most significant of which for the City Council would be to plan for an additional roughly 3,500 homes. Accommodating these extra homes would be a challenge and would require the identification of additional sites, most probably additional greenfield sites. For the council to do that, that would delay the preparation of the Exeter plan quite significantly and could result in the need to prepare a different style of local plan, which would effectively mean starting the process at the beginning. However, there are some transitional arrangements, and by publishing the plan next week, the City Council would avoid those risks. The City Council would still need to plan for that uplift in housing, but it could do so at a later date and in conjunction with our neighbouring authorities as part of a coordinated approach to plan making. Since the full draft consultation ended in January, the local plans team have been focusing on progressing the plan towards that Regulation 19 version. That work has included analysing all the previous carry on. Yeah. So the work that's
So can you just pause?
Yeah, pause. Yeah, we'll pause. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
report. We've had a great break. Everybody's okay. So, Ian, you don't have to start again. You can refresh us if you want. But Ian, sorry for that interruption.
That's
If you'd like to continue.
absolutely fine, Chair. I'm glad everybody is feeling well. So I think where we'd got to was that I was just explaining that since January, when the consultation ended on the last version of the plan, the local plan team has been working through all of the consultation responses, gathering all the evidence and engaging members. So that has included various reports and discussions at strategic scrutiny, and also monthly meetings at the planning member working group. So this final stage now that we've got to of the plan is very tightly defined by a legal process, and is different to the previous stages of the plan in two important ways. Firstly, only formal representations can be provided, and specifically in relation to the 4 tests of soundness that the plan will be examined on by the inspectorate. So I'll just explain what those tests actually mean, and I'll try to be fairly non-technical in that. So the first one is positively prepared. Basically, that means that we have to demonstrate that we're meeting our objectively assessed housing needs, so housing numbers. The second one is justified, which means is it based on evidence? The third one is effective, which means are the policies deliverable, and included within that, are they viable? And then the fourth one is to be consistent with national policy, which is basically the National Planning Policy Framework, or the NPPF. So the responses that we receive have to be based on those 4 tests. The second key difference is that the City Council needs to submit the plan in the form that it published it for consultation. So that means it will be unchanged, but would sit alongside all the representations that have been received during the consultation period. The reason for that is to make significant changes at that stage would mean that of rerunning the process of consultation, and that would in all likelihood mean that the council couldn't take advantage of those transitional arrangements, as I've explained, and the risks that would employ. So the next step would be to submit the plan to the planning inspectorate later next year, round about June, we think, next year. So from then on, we are in the hands of the planning inspectorate. We think that an examination is likely to begin round about November, December, so round about this time next year. That is subject to the planning inspectorate's timescales, of course. We think the outcome, hopefully an adoption of the plan, will be later in 2026. So I'm now going to go into some of the key policies that have been changed since the last version of the plan. 2 in particular I'd like to focus on. One on affordable housing, that's policy H4, and the other one is on the question of mixed and balanced communities, including student accommodation. So I'll just briefly summarise those changes, and then I'll hand over to George, who will just explain some of the other differences that we've made to the plan at a high level, of course. So one of the most significant revisions does relate to the affordable housing policy, say H4. So it's first of all, I need to emphasise that the plan does retain a commitment for addressing both viability challenges, but also delivering sustainable and affordable housing across the city. Through the revised policies in the plan, strategic partnerships and innovative mechanisms will also be deployed, and the officers are confident that we will meet our housing targets as a result of all of those methods. What is being proposed in this version is a more nuanced approach to the affordable housing policy, which reflects both the viability evidence that we've received, but also an updated housing needs assessment. As we know, brownfield and greenfield developments have very different costs and values, and therefore viability is different, which is why they need to be looked at in different ways. There's also a need for both affordable housing for rent, which we know is a priority, but also, interestingly, homes for affordable homes ownership. So in fact, the viability evidence is showing roughly split there is roughly 50-50. So the existing policy requires 35% affordable housing across all sites, and the split there is 70-30. So 70% would be for social rent, including affordable rent. The other 35%, sorry, the other 30% would be for affordable rent shared ownership. The new policy retains the 35% on greenfield, but is proposing 15% on brownfield. And as I say, that is a consequence of the viability evidence. In addition, across both types of housing, greenfield and brownfield, the policy is proposing that split now of 50-50 in terms of social rent and affordable home ownership, and that is on the basis of the housing needs assessment. Just to explain furthermore as well that within the social rent element, that could include affordable rent. However, the evidence is suggesting that for the majority of our residents who would want to access social rent, affordable rent is likely to be unattractive or unaffordable. So it is an option that's explained in the subtext of the policy, but it doesn't appear in the high-level policy because we're trying to give preference to social rent in accordance with our housing needs assessment. As I say, that there is a proposal to introduce some additional explanatory text as a minor amendment to the current version of the plan that's appended to the report. I've also said, and it's worth emphasising, that to maximise affordable housing delivery across the city council can employ other methods. That's including our own council-owned housing programme, which is seeking to deliver 500 council homes by 2030. We can also deploy partnerships with Homes England and housing associations, which could unlock additional funding for complex developments. And then finally, commuter payments can be deployed to direct funds to strategically more viable sites, including those that the council wants to bring forward on its own land. So when you add those together and consider that the policy as a whole for greenfield and brownfield across all sites would deliver approximately 5,000 homes, if you took an average, which would be 20%, that would still deliver 1,000 affordable homes across 10 years. The key position with that policy is that it's effectively being driven by those tests of soundness, and that's the thing to bear in mind in considering that. Will be examined on that basis, and so it's absolutely essential that the evidence is there, so the policy is justified based on the evidence, and it's effective and deliverable, and that's the issue about viability. Without those tests being met, that would be result in significant challenges at the examination, and I would add that would run the risk of the plan being found unsound. The other policy I'd like to highlight is one that is of concern, I know, to members as well, which is the one that relates to balanced communities, but I would say, in particular, student housing. The challenge of balancing the clear benefits that the university brings to the city, both in terms of employment and investment, culture, spend in the city centre, is to balance that against potential impacts on the development and in communities. So the current policies in the adopted plan talk about community balance, and so does the St James Neighbourhood Plan. Policy H5 was a product of its time back in 2005. Clearly, there's been significant growth in the university in that time. And subsequently, the university's growth strategy has had to adapt to that. The other side of that coin, if you like, is that to make more efficient use of land and reduce the need to travel, particularly in the city centre, and achieve other priorities such as net zero, it is important that that student accommodation is located centrally, and particularly close to the campuses at Streatham. So the other factor to mention is that over a period of time, there has been a number of appeal cases on this question of community balance, and the council has been challenged and has lost appeals on that basis. So the new policy H15, now talks about housing density, size and mix, and proposes a range of houses and sizes to support the creation and maintenance of what we're now calling mixed communities. And that's offering a more practical alternative to the term community balance. So I'm going to stop there on that aspect and invite George just to talk briefly about some of the other revisions that might be of interest to members, and then happy to receive questions.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ian. I may start, rather than by talking about the revisions, just by going back to the beginning and mentioning where the plan is consistent with what we've consulted on previously. And that comes through the key strategy policy with the plan, which is policy S1, which sets the spatial strategy for the plan. And as members will be familiar, this focuses the majority of development on brownfield sites, protecting our landscape setting, green spaces, taking account of our heritage assets, reducing the need to travel, promoting the vitality of the city centre, and supporting active lifestyles. And those key principles remain in the revised version of the plan and the revision to that core policy, if you like. We've added some further strength to it, talking about a little bit more about citywide biodiversity, a little bit more about heritage, and also talking about employment provision across the wider sub-region. But that kind of key strategy direction remains, and I think that's quite an important point to make. In terms of revisions throughout the plan, there are an awful lot. Effectively, throughout the document, we have taken on board consultation responses, partnership discussions, discussions with members and the outcomes of those, and additional evidence. But there are some that are notable. Ian's covered a couple, but there are a few more. Perhaps a few in terms of development allocations to start with. So members would remember that in the last version of the plan, we had a series of strategic brownfield sites, and we do in this version. However, we've removed 2 of those as allocations for this version of the plan. So we've removed Marsh Barton and the Northgate area, which were both within the Livable Exeter initiative originally. We've removed those as allocations. Allocations being sites that we would rely on to deliver housing within the plan period. And we've removed those on the basis of these tests of soundness, which Ian has already mentioned. In particular, the need to evidence the delivery and availability of those sites. They still feature in the plan, however, so they are now described as regeneration opportunity areas where we would encourage high quality development, but we're not relying on them delivering during the plan period. So there's two quite significant sites revisions there. We've also removed one of the previous employment allocations, which was at Middlemore, which is the Toby Carvery site, because we couldn't robustly and sufficiently establish its availability, back to those tests of soundness again. So there's a revision there. If we look at what we've done therefore to, I suppose, replace some of the development requirements that removal of those sites, those larger scale mixed use sites has necessitated the need for, we've added in a number of additional sites across the city. So I think we've added in around 18 new either mixed use or residential sites across the city. So effectively, we've balanced any housing requirement that we may have lost from Marsh Barton and Northgate with these additional sites, and we're less reliant on a small number of key sites in terms of the deliverability and tests of soundness. We've also revised some of the sites. We have a series of sites which are still within the plan, but we've reviewed their boundaries, for example, because of availability or looking at on-the-ground constraints. So we've made some revisions to site boundaries as well. Just in terms of policies, I won't go through all the revisions we've made, but there are some additional policies that feature in this version of the plan in various chapters. So we have one new policy in the climate change section, which talks about climate change resilience and adaptation. I've already mentioned the regeneration opportunity areas, but we have a policy covering those. We have another policy covering retail. We have two additional heritage policies covering conservation areas and archaeology, and an additional reworking of one of the design policies, and a whole new policy talking about how development ought to design out crime. So there's a number of revisions covering sites and policies, but that covers some of the key ones. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Members of the executive. Councillor Olcott.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you'll indulge me speaking a little bit on this, because I think it's quite a momentous day. Thank you. I think I just become a councillor in 2021 when this work was sort of in its initial stages. And here we are sort of 3-4 years later, 3 very well engaged with public consultations, multiple scrutiny meetings where we've been able to, and I was on the back benches for most of those, so I've been on the other side of it too. Multiple planning member working group meetings where we're able to sort of pore over every chapter. And here we are with the final draft ready for publication, and it's been a huge amount of work. So thanks again to the team for that. So yeah, I've only recently inherited this portfolio, but planning has been something that's been very close to my heart during my time as a councillor, and having been involved in various planning appeals, trying to protect our sort of city's green spaces, I've seen how important it is that we really have clearly defined, robust, reasonable and well-evidenced policies that we can rely on to help steer development in the city, and steer it as we want to towards sustainable brownfield sites, for multiple reasons, for our net zero ambitions, for our healthy lifestyle ambitions, etc., etc. And this plan really does achieve that, underpinned by our livable Exeter principles. It is underpinned by our brownfield first approach, and as we've heard, that it reflects the feelings of our
community, I remember on the very first consultation around the issues, it was resoundingly clear from the community that that's what they wanted, that a brownfield first approach to development. So I think we can feel really pleased that this is reflective of, you know, our city as a whole. But to bring back a couple of the points that Ian and George have raised, we can't have it all. If we want to promote brownfield first development, we do have to accept that there are viability constraints. It's expensive to build. It's more time consuming, issues around contamination and infrastructure, etc. And market value is lower on those sorts of developments. Therefore, we cannot expect to deliver, unfortunately, and very regrettably, we can't expect to deliver the same level of affordable housing that we would on a greenfield site. And that's been evidenced already in the brownfield development that's happened in the city. But I do just want to highlight a few like silver linings or positives that we can, you know, take some comfort from. The first is that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that this can be reviewed over time. So this plan goes to 2041, but the affordable housing policy can be reviewed over time, as if the market value of that kind of development increases, we can review that and hopefully, where possible, if possible, increase that. So I think that's something that's important to know. This is not set in stone until that time. And the second is just to reiterate what Ian said, that, you know, we can deliver housing, affordable housing through the planning system, but there are other ways in which we can do it, such as through partnerships with agencies such as Homes England. And I just think it's really important that we recognise that, you know, taking this brownfield first approach will result, if we rely solely on the planning system to deliver affordable housing, it will result in a shortfall. So we really need to make a commitment as a council to pursue, you know, every avenue to leverage funding in other ways. And I know that's a commitment that we all share. So I just want to make that really clear. This does not reflect at all a shift in that commitment. And secondly, thank you for highlighting that piece around the mixed community balance, because I did hear those concerns coming through quite strongly when this came to strategic scrutiny a couple of weeks ago. And rest assured, everyone who has concerns, these issues have been robustly discussed over a long period. And I wanted to just highlight that there is an improvement in this plan on the definition, is it not, of over concentration with regards to HMOs, that it actually gives a definition of what that means as 20% now, which was missing before. So I think we need to also recognise that strengthens our protections in that way, and that there are other policies that will work alongside that mixed community definition to help ensure that, you know, we are seeing well balanced kind of developments in our communities. I just wanted to make that point as well. And I think that's all I have to say. I might remember something later, but thank you so much. This is a huge day, and I think it's really positive.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other members of the executive wish? Councillor Foll was first, then Williams, and Vizard.
Thank you, Chair. The leader highlighted the high level of consultation that's been taking place earlier as a council. And with that in mind, it's been a number of years since I had the portfolio for this area. But could I ask Ian about the level of consultation, the level of engagement, in fact, this led up to this?
Thank you. Councillor Vizard.
Thank you, Chair. And can I just echo everything that Councillor Alcock has said very well, and highlighted a lot of important factors of this. It's a mighty document, and the work that's been undertaken on this and with the current portfolio and previous portfolio holders has been immense and really, really important. So thank you to everybody involved. It's great to see the chapter on climate change. That's extremely detailed. And looks ahead, isn't just status quo. And I think I've just got a question around that, which you can help me with, perhaps pull out a couple of things that maybe examples of where, rather than being reactive to government policy and measures on tackling climate change through the planning process, where we are looking to be proactive, get ahead of the game, set a high bar. So maybe there's a couple of things you could comment on there. And the other point, good section on transport and touching on public transport, buses, active travel, all vitally important. Just in terms of the bus service, which we know is hugely pressured, to what extent do you think there is some scope through this plan of making a difference, of actually improving transport in the city? What weight will this carry? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question about the viability evidence, and it's based on what we have, on the reality of what we've been able to achieve, but I just wondered over what period of time. And the other thing I wondered if you could comment on is, Councillor Alcott referred to it, the working in partnership with, say, Homes England, that enables us to achieve more affordable housing. And I just wondered if you could give us an example of how that has worked for us currently, for example, in Exmouth Junction. And so it's just a way of making a reality of what these percentages, we've had 35% for ages, but we haven't been able to achieve that. So it's quite interesting that we are moving into a situation which is based in reality and evidence-based. So I think that's quite important. And I'd also like to thank the team for all their huge effort in pulling all of this together. The consultations, the public consultations going out and about to the public has been absolutely amazing. And also I want to thank individual officers for their time when, people like me have come back to you and asked about, why have we got this mixed communities rather than balanced communities, because it has been a real issue in some areas in Exeter. And it's your patience and time in explaining that and bringing it to this meeting as well. So thank you very much for that.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you. And again, to echo what everybody else has said about the appreciation of the amount of work that's gone into this, not just work, but very good work, and the breadth of consultation at every opportunity, it seems, to get this in place. My question is sort of in the report, but I wondered if you could clarify it for me to be really sure. So I think it's 8.4 of the report itself, not the plan, it's talking about transitional national arrangements. So the need for us to get this report published now, before the new housing targets come up, and you did mention that. I just want to be really clear, does that mean if this report is accepted now with the current housing targets, not the new housing targets, it can stay in place till 2040? I'm asking you to predict the future a little bit, really, but that is obviously one of the big reasons you put here for us to get this in place now. But what is the likelihood of anybody coming back and saying, no, you do have to redo it? Because the transitional national arrangements, I think, is what I'm asking you to expand on. Thank you.
I've got a question for you to answer presently, Ian. What can we change in this report? Because there's things I'd like to change. I mean, can we say, well, actually, we don't want 15%. We want 35. Why stop there? Is it as simple as that? I'd like you to explain that, why we just can't change what we want, because we're meant to be, and what would be the impact if we were to say that? I think you might have catched on it presently. I think that was important. So anyway, we've got some questions there for you. Before I go to the leaders in general, I've got a question here from Councillor Mitchell. Would you like to ask your question, Councillor?
Thank you, Leader. And it alludes to the last question from Laura. On the 30th of July 2024, the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government wrote to all local authority leaders and chief executives in England about emerging local plans. The letter states, for plans at an advanced stage of preparation, Regulation 19, I'm assuming that's the stage we are at, it means allowing them to continue to examination unless there's a significant gap between the plan and the new local housing figure, in which case we propose to ask authorities to rework their plans to take into account the higher figure. My question arising from that statement is, can the leader offer clarity as to what is meant by a significant gap? And can he inform the executive what, if any, gap exists between the Exeter housing projections in the new local plan and those proposed by the Labour government? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to assure you, I did not give anybody sight of this answer before or question before, if you think I was trying to, because I don't want you to stop putting your questions in advance. A significant gap was defined in the explanatory information which went alongside the National Planning Policy Reforms consultation in summer of 2024. It was defined as over 200 dwellings per annum. The requirement for homes included in the draft plan is 642. The revised local housing requirement for Exeter, which was consulted on this summer, was 815, which equates to a difference of 173, which is less than 200. So if you want to ask a supplementary on that one, please do. But if it is more technical than that, you may have to have a written answer.
Could we ask what assurances, if any, has the council received from this received to state that the current proposal is acceptable and will not be asked to be reworked? I know you've talked about the 200, but it's close to it. So are we assuming that this will go through without being sent back?
Okay, we'll ask Ian to respond to that. Anybody else? Councillor Jobson, then Councillor Moore.
Thank you. It's a similar vein, really, but in view of the fact that they've approved this examination, this Regulation 19 plan will be out of sync, as has just been said with the new NPPF. Is any legal advice being taken as to how that may be viewed down the line by an inspector on any planning appeal?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. I'm interested in the comments you've made about affordable housing. So the new policy, and I've only read it once, so I haven't got my head around it completely, talks about social rent housing. Our current policy talks about council housing and social rent housing. So does that mean council housing isn't included in that, because our housing associations charge higher rents than the council? And so what we're looking at is that, so you have changed the policy since the last draft. So the executive have now changed that policy from a last draft. Regulation 18 had 35% on the 4 Exeter sites. And now this is a big difference to say the brownfield sites will have 15% affordable housing. So that equates to, if it's 1,000 homes, which would be affordable across all 10 years, which is what you said, that would be, that 1,000 homes is about 0.07%. So I'd like to know who decided that, because that's quite a massive change from the Regulation 18 version. And I would also like to know about the start of the consultation. So when the consultation begins just before Christmas, so I don't know, maybe it's next week, will all the evidence accompany it at the launch of that consultation, or is it going to have to wait until the council meeting? Because I'm not quite clear from the set of recommendations whether that will all be available. So, for example, I'm being particularly interested in the second flood risk assessment report. So I'm looking forward to reading that. I do want to say that I welcome the additions, particularly that have been made to the plan in relation to nature and water, which I look for, I'll read in detail, but I note that they've been included. And I would like to see some sort of stronger targets in there. So, for example, it does have a welcome section on improving the quality of water, and then it talks about having it needs to address the upstream, and it will welcome developments if they can improve that upstream. But I'm not quite clear how that mechanism is going to come about. And I just have a technical question. So this item has got sections for the executive to resolve, and then it's got questions coming to council for recommendations. But in the forward plan, it only talks about it all being a resolved matter for executive, and it doesn't actually give council notice that these other recommendations will be coming to council. So I wondered if there's a technical issue that needs to be addressed, because we only have had notice in the forward plan, which I checked and downloaded today, that this publication draft will be resolved here at executive.
Just on that final point, the last part of it is resolved, but it will go to full council with recommendations, and full council can consider those recommendations. Just one point. I haven't had my dirty paws over this, changing this and changing that and putting that. I wish I could. And it's all been evidence-based and everything else. But I'll come now to Councillor Alcock. Is there anything you want to add in response to anything that's been said by the members?
I think only, and I've lost track, that was really some good sort of
questions.
questions.
I think only in response to your question, Councillor Morch, the officers can probably embellish, but it's been adjusted because of the viability evidence that came through, which came through, more recently. And I know from having, because, I was quite taken aback from hearing that too. And we had extensive conversations with the officers who I know worked very hard to really, really scrutinise the viability evidence that came back from the consultants, really considered it very carefully. And it's just the state of the things, it's the state of the market and the capitalist society that we live in. But as I said, I feel confident that we are going to put every effort to leverage funds in other ways to keep our delivery of affordable housing up. I'll let the officers respond to everything else.
Thank you, Councillor. Ian, a number of issues there, those that you can respond to and those who you may wish to go back to, but if you can, it would help the opinion forming here.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, thank you for all the brilliant questions. I've run out of paper, writing them all down, but that's not a problem, because I think that level of scrutiny and interest is really welcomed, and they were all really great questions, actually. I'll begin answering them, and then I will hand over some of the aspects to George as well as we go through. So there were quite a lot, so I'll try and go through them in the order that I heard them. If I've misheard the question, just let me know. I think the first question was about whether the policies can be reviewed over time. So the first thing to say on that is that it's quite normal when a plan is adopted for there to be a review of that plan within 5 years of the adoption. That's pretty automatic these days. What I would also say is that there's also the additional opportunity for an earlier review. Now, I mentioned earlier in the presentation about dealing with the uplift in housing numbers. In all probability, if our plan is adopted in 2026, it is possible, I'll argue probable, that the planning inspector would also recommend an early review. So it's standard to have reviews in 5 years. In this case, with the uplift, I think there's a very good chance that we'll be asked to do an early review. And when we look at that early review, there is that opportunity to work in collaboration with our neighbouring districts on looking at the strategic housing requirement. The next question was about levels of consultation from Councillor Foe and engagement. So we didn't go into detail on that this time, because there is a very big difference in the way that we will do the consultation this time. But in previous consultations, the three that we've undertaken have involved multiple methods of consultation. So there's an online consultation, there's been an exhibition in every ward in the city. There's been lots of engagement with individuals and with meetings, with councillors, with community groups. I'm pretty confident, actually, in my time, I've never seen such a level of engagement. And what that resulted in was, no doubt in my mind, was boosted the actual levels of response and engagement because of that. I haven't got the figures at hand. We can get the figures of the most recent one, which would tell us how many people did respond, both online and at exhibitions and at the coffee mornings and all of that. So we can get that. We can regurgitate that information for you about the actual level of response. And as George said also, that it's not just about doing the consultation and getting the responses, what you do with the responses. And again, a lot of the work that's gone on since January is about evaluating those responses and updating and changing the plan accordingly. So that's been a really positive process. The next question was about setting whether this plan does set the bar high in terms of sustainability. And then there was a related question about the weight that we can give to the transport side, given also that we're not the transport authority. So I'm gonna let George answer those two in a minute, but you can do it now if you like, and I'll return to the next set. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just to throw you in at the deep end.
Thanks, Ian. So I suppose various elements of the plan which go perhaps above and beyond in terms of climate change and responding to that challenge. Perhaps the most significant of all isn't in the climate change section. It's just the whole development strategy. Minimising the need to travel and internalising development is one of the key actions that planning can take in terms of minimising the impact of emissions. But we have included the 2030 net zero ambition. We've got policies in the plan which act as a backstop to ensure that future home standards are achieved. We have policies in the plan relating to embodied carbon. We've also identified a series of local energy networks as well. So there's an awful lot of content in terms of responding to the climate change challenge. In terms of bus provision, we've worked with Devon County Council to ensure that one of the policies in the plan, which covers public transport specifically, identifies clearly some of the key route corridors for improvement. So they are identified sometimes in the local transport plan, but also within the bus service improvement plan, which is another DCC document. But we've lifted some of those and included them in the public transport policy so that it gives local planning authority weight towards those. So we've done what we can to sort of embed those provisions within the plan as well.
So to carry on, I think the next question was one from, I think it was Councillor Alcock, about the period of time that actually it was Councillor Williams, actually, sorry. It was about the period of time that the viability evidence applies. Again, very insightful question, because viability is one of those evidences that it is a moment in time in many ways, and for a plan making process, that viability evidence is at high level, because it's looking at a plan period and it's looking at a large area across the city. The kind of evidence that we need for the plan is different to the evidence that we need for, say, for an individual planning application, which is a lot more detailed, frankly, and is based on a lot of different factors and information, but the basic principles are the same. So what we have to do is present the evidence as it is, as we have it, and is the most up to date that we can present. It does change, but it's unlikely to change in the period that we've got between now and the examination. If new evidence comes to light, we have time to submit and prepare that evidence. And in fact, as we go forward, I'm going to relate to another question in a minute about what evidence is available now for the public and members to see. We're continuing to work on the evidence base, and that's why we won't be submitting the plan until roughly June, because there's still quite a lot more work to be done. So all of that work will continue. It evolves. The evidence is kept as up to date as possible, because that's really critical when we come to demonstrating those tests of soundness.
So does that just to so is it a year, or is it the previous 2 years, or is it a rolling program of sort of a year and it's a moving year? It's just getting a sense of when the evidence, what the evidence covers. That's all. That was I didn't word it very well. Sorry.
I want to say that that it's based on what we understand in terms. So the evidence is based on viability. So the cost of building homes versus the value that those homes bring and what the difference is. Okay, so if the cost is greater than the value, it's a negative viability and so on. So I want to say that it's based on the information, the best information we have at the time, and that evidence will then be taken forward to the examination. It could be that we get new information that would need to be refreshed. I think it's unlikely, first of all, because we're not going to commission any further evidence during the period. We're not planning to. We could get challenged on the evidence. And so what's common during the examination process is that we do further work. We write topic papers and so on. And that's also presented during the examination process. So it's kind of evolving, it's ongoing. I would say there isn't a set period for that. There's not a cut-off. Yeah. Okay.
Just to say, Ian, so some of the evidence that's been asked, will that evidence be made, one, available to the examiner, obviously, and any updates, as you just said, and will that be made available to the members of the public?
Yeah.
So all that will be out there. Yeah. Okay, good.
So all the evidence will be packaged and sent to the inspector. It's also will be available and is available online to be viewed alongside the plan. And then as we update the evidence, that will be added to sort of a bank really of evidence that we'll keep adding to until at the point in which we submit. And then even then beyond that, as I said, once you're into the examination, it takes a few months that and as well as the hearings, there'll be exchanges and information that is exchanged during that process as well.
So if for my mind, from what Councillor Mitchell has said, as soon as this has been agreed, it's out of date. And then what happens, you've explained how it can be changed and what happens. And what I want to understand, because I'm thinking like we talked about 35%. Now, the issue with regard to the former plan that we are, or the current plan, indeed, it never was 35%, was it? As I remember back in the day when I came on the council in 2011, it was around about 20 or 25%, but we had subsequently changed it. I believe that. I'm not asking you to trawl through it. You just would have to believe me on that particular point. Look, I'm not opening up the debate anymore, I'm afraid, because then email that to us, because I don't think that unless it affects these recommendations, how does it apply on these? Tell me.
Thank you, Chair. I have two legal questions now, actually. First of all, I have raised the question of the publication of the item on the forward plan. The only item published on the forward plan in relation to these decisions was the recommendation for the executive to resolve the publication of the plan. There's no notification of any decisions to be going to council. And the second point, which I asked, which I'm almost was there, was when the draft is published, will all the evidence be published alongside it? Otherwise, if people are putting in technical responses to the plan, they won't be able to do it if they don't see all the evidence that accompanies it until after the consultation closes, because we've been just been told that the evidence will continue to be updated. So it's like sort of playing
So
with
on
moving
that second point, I thought you clarified that it will be available. That's what I thought you told me. If I'm confused, put me right. With regard to the forward plan and whatever, there's no technical knockout blow here of this item, is there?
There's no legal, the executive forward plan is actually only for executive resolve matters. The council decisions don't actually apply. We only do it as a transparency mechanism.
Right, so there's no technical legal thing. You gotcha. You're all wrong in doing it. So that's not that. So we've got the recommendations before us, and thank you for that discussion. I think it's been helpful. No, Michael. No, you can get that clarification at the council meeting.
I can't.
No, hang on,
Because
Michael,
the wording.
let me understand. Can I please allow me to explain? This is the executive meeting. So, I mean, if one of these members here, members of the executive, was asking for clarification on an item, because they have to vote on it. So they need to be satisfied how they are voting. You don't have to be satisfied how you're voting. You will be satisfied. You need to be satisfied at the council meeting, and you may need to. Thank you for telling us how to think, but I don't think it's a matter
Will
for
I be
us.
able to discuss the local plan content at the council meeting according to the wording of 2.4, please?
So I want to know.
Which one? At the bottom?
Because it's talking about the approval of the submission, isn't actually talking about approval of the plan.
And this evening, you've had an interesting discussion on elements of the plan. And as you're aware, members only received this plan last week. That council meeting is the only opportunity for members to make observations.
Michael, I'm going to say, first of all, I don't think I'll be able to stop you. And the second one, the most important thing is, if it is a recommendation to council, it is up for discussion at council. And that's what I'm going to say. It's up for discussion at council, if that's it. Okay? And I don't feel for one moment the Lord Mayor would stop you speaking on a recommendation or asking points on a council. All right? Now, I'm going to ask the members of the executive who are voting now, are you happy and understanding of the recommendations before you, both the resolved matter and the recommendation to council? Okay. Right, I'm going to proceed to the vote. All the, hang on, quite right. Well done, Laura Wright, Councillor Wright. All those in favour of these recommendations, please show. Do I need to do the resolved matter separately?
No, we'll take them all together. So
Okay, I didn't want anybody to have done something wrong. Right, thank you very much for that. We now move on to item 15, which is the use of body-worn video cameras. There are two recommendations here. And Ian Collinson, a shorter one, no doubt.
I can assure you this will be a shorter presentation. In fact, I've also got the added pleasure of an example of a body-worn video camera, which I'm happy to pass around if you want to have a look at it while I'm speaking. That's a real live one, so please don't drop it. It's not switched on, so don't worry. It's not taking any pictures. So the report is seeking approval for the use of body-worn video cameras for enforcement type activity across the City Council, and to ensure that in using that equipment that we comply with all the legal requirements. So 22 of those cameras were purchased earlier in the year using funding from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and they were purchased to address growing levels of antisocial behaviour, particularly in the city centre. So the intention is that initially, in a sort of first phase, that those cameras will be used by our car parks team, and also the new community safety team in their daily duties. The report goes into a lot more detail about how those cameras will be used and the various technical aspects. I'm tempted to say I'm happy to take questions on those aspects. I might have to defer some of the answers though, but that's my presentation.
Okay, you'll tell us perhaps in a minute whether they're leased, whether they're bought outright, whether we got guarantees, because these things are dated as soon as you bought them. But I'll open it up now to members of the committee. Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. I think that there's quite a kind of debate on these, isn't there? Because obviously I see there's the positives, there's increased accountability and evidence gathering and trust and reform, but there are also privacy concerns and concerns around data rights and storage and such. You mentioned in your report that there will be, training given to officers as part of using this. And I'm recording us as we speak.
I should have put in the opening remarks, can cameras also?
Just looking at the equality impact assessment, there's several protected characteristic areas where you've noted there's a risk of unconscious bias. And if you're looking at the policy, it seems like there are in some situations where it would be expected that the camera is just on, and then others, such as housing visits, where it would be the officer's discretion as to whether to record or not. And just mindful of those risks around bias, unconscious or otherwise, has that been factored into the training that officers will be receiving on how to use this? And will you be monitoring the use of this in terms of what's being recorded, what's not, getting feedback, etc., so that we can make sure that that risk isn't materialising?
Draw good points. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Having looked at the device itself, it seems to have a screen on the front, which presumably because one of these questions is, are you recording me or not? So there's no light on it that's flashing, but you can see yourself, as it were, on the individual's chest, which makes it fairly clear you're being recorded, and also what is being recorded, which is good to see. And in terms of, as Councillor Alcock said, in terms of crime prevention, in terms of being able to evidence what has occurred, whether it's a crime or not, is important, both to protect the residents or citizens, and also the officers themselves. I think it's really useful. I suppose my question is that presumably it will a bit like my phone on the camera on my phone photograph God knows how much. When I go back, most of it was of the moment and probably could be deleted. How is the storage or the retention of films made? How is that judged? Because presumably there will be an awful lot of footage, some of which relates to incidents and could be used as evidence, but others you'll have quite a bit of retained data. And how is that judged, the disposal versus retention? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I've asked an awful lot of questions myself as portfolio holder. I'm sure you'll be relieved to know around data storage, all sorts of things, equality, impact assessment. I would just say I was satisfied with the result of some of the questions that this is covered by what's already in place for the use of filming and management of data under our current CCTV control room camera usage. So it's covered under that. So yes, it is covered. I just wanted to draw attention to the quality assessment, impact assessment. Very much is sort of focusing on these cameras being there to protect staff, which absolutely they are, to gain evidence of things that or to stop some sort of behaviour. We all know that once you know you're under a CCTV camera, you're not likely to chuck your fag butt on the pavement or similar discussion earlier on. it does put you off doing things. So having these cameras will hopefully put off some potential antisocial behaviour. So the impact of that is a very positive one, is what we're going to hope for the city centre in particular. It's going to be a positive impact on antisocial behaviour in the city. So it's all part of the antisocial behaviour sort of strategies that are coming forward to make the city a better place to be. So that has been included. I would have liked more to be made of that, really, because it is helping to protect a lot of people. So there will be a very positive impact. Thank you for allowing me to make that point.
That's fine. Okay. I've got a question, Ian. Excuse me. Yeah, I see it's stored for 30 days, which was probably. If you take something over me, am I entitled to say to you, not there and then, am I entitled to make an application to the council and say, you took some footage of me the other day, I'd like to see that, please, or I'd like a copy of what you have taken of me. I don't know if that is in here somewhere, and whether or not that we have a legal requirement too. No other members? I've got Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I agree this is a really interesting discussion, really interesting area, because I absolutely recognise the role this plays in community safety and also keeping council staff safe as well, because I know that staff have to enter some very unusual or very challenging situations. We also need to recognise that we're one of the most countries in Europe where it has the most CCTV. So we're watched all over the place. So there's lots of interesting issues to balance. The interesting thing about this report and these recommendations, this recommendation basically is to approve it, and that's it. The report talks about it being a trial. How long is this trial for? Who does it report to? And then who decides whether it should continue as a permanent thing or being rolled out further? It might be really helpful for everybody in terms of understanding how well it's working and what needs to change, if the manual or the policy relating to it needs to be updated, if there's a report back after a certain period of time, because this just says, here we go, it's adopted. We talked about the EQI. The religious section isn't complete. On the other sections, it mentions unconscious bias quite a lot. And actually, we do know that there is a lot of discrimination against people on the basis of faith. So actually, I'm really quite disappointed that that section wasn't completed, because it could cause, it could be an issue that is raised, and that we haven't really thought about what the implications of that. So on the whole, I think it's a positive step forward for community safety, but I do want to see how the impact of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Officers, that's interesting. There's a number of questions and points being raised. If you can clarify a trial, and if it's not a trial you're asking us to approve, what are our levers to change, amend, or vary from time to time, or even to stop it if we wanted to, if we didn't like it, or amend stuff. That may be an interesting point. If you could go on to that.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to say one comment, and I'm going to ask Simon to answer the detailed questions. The comment is that we are the last remaining council in Devon to adopt body-worn video cameras. And as far as I'm concerned, this isn't a trial. This is the proposal to introduce them as part of that enforcement activity. Initially, as I said, it's with the car park team and the community safety team. We will also look at other areas of the council in due course. But Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pick up the technical questions. So, as Councillor Wright has said, this sits under the council-wide CCTV policy. That is quite deliberate, because you've got a set of highly trained security industry authority accredited staff who are vetted to the nth degree and have to resit their qualifications to be accredited by the SIA. So it's quite deliberate. The staff on the ground that will be wearing them cannot download the footage and access that footage. It will be through very controlled mechanisms that are in place for the rest of the CCTV. So if footage was needed for evidential purposes, then there's a suite of forms that are filled out to justify. There's counter signatories that have got to be placed on that. Same applies to me for gathering evidence, for taking matters across my area of delegation to make sure those checks and balances are in place. Again, the data retention, as the leader has pointed out, is 30 days, and that's in line with the Security Industry Authority's guidance and the Information Commissioner. What I would say on the if an individual is recorded, as is the case with the CCTV cameras across the city, then they can put in a subject access request for that footage. There are various processes that have to be gone through because they can't just view whatever. So there's various face blurring, etc., for anybody that is not part of that subject access request. Just a general point I would say is, and I've sort of worked with the licensed trade in those in hospitality, etc., where they have become commonplace. It does act as a positive tool in modifying behaviour and diffusing situations. So therefore, sadly, we as a council are seeing an increase of sort of unacceptable behaviour being directed towards our staff. And we have people in frontline operational roles that, by the very nature of their job, are conducting enforcement activities that are not very popular or are challenging behaviours out in the city. So what this does do is immediately diffuse that, because people are aware that they are being recorded and tend to act in a different way.
Ian, and I just want to come back as chair. I am concerned that there is no formal opportunity to review, or are you confirming that this is constantly under review, this policy, if circumstance, I just don't know, if things change, you can say something's happened, I don't know. Surely we would say, hey, we need to look at this, don't we? We need to change it. So in other words, it may not be a trial, but we are always available to review these things from time to time, should we need to. I just want to assure, because this has come up. Chief Executive.
Chair, I would say it's probably best practice in all policies that we set a timescale for which they should be reviewed. So that's certainly something we'll take into account as we go forward. But for this policy, I'm kind of seeing nods. So my feeling is we would set a date for review. But I think, just to say generally as a point in policy making, we should set dates for review of policy. So we'll make sure we work on that.
Thank you. It is important because we all, we don't want to get things wrong. Okay, so you've heard what the Chief Executive said. So there will be policies to review this at the appropriate time, and that would come back to us with a report at a given time. And I'll hear what, obviously you need enough experience to get that learning if we were to change something. So those are the recommendations. I'm going to move them from the chair. Can I have a seconder?
Sorry, can I make
You can. Grammatic errors. You've
a point? Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Well, just one point. It does say in the report that this policy will be reviewed in 2025 anyway, when the new CCTV policy is rewritten. So it's bringing this into place so that the staff can use these cameras for now, but the whole thing will be reviewed. I thought that was a pertinent point. And the other very pedantic point is, please could the apostrophe be removed from the word cameras?
An equality issue?
Video cameras.
Plural, they don't belong.
There's no need for an apostrophe. That's a
okay, thank you.
pedantic grammar.
You're quite right, and also for pointing out the other issue about the review. Councillor Olcott, I'll let you come back in.
Thank you, and I'm sorry to be finicky, but for me to go on this, I kind of want to have an answer to my question around training and the unconscious bias risk.
Yes.
And it's good to hear that you were reassured with all the questions you asked, so maybe that's been covered, but I just wanted to hear it.
I'm trying to keep a bit of control here. It's going all over the place. Bob, before I get the Chief Executive come in, is this a question, clarification, as opposed to a contribution? Because I've done contributions. Good.
That if the section about religions or ethnic minorities was not filled in, can we have assurance that that will be?
Okay, it's going to come to council anyway. Chief Executive.
I think we can say yes on the bits that are missing from the EQIA. In terms of Councillor Alcock's point about unconscious bias and how we're going to factor that in. So the council recently underwent some work on our equality, diversity and inclusion current practice for review, and Joey Yellen, the Director for People, is incorporating that in her HR workforce planning going forward. As part of that, we'll be looking at EDI training, and as part of that, absolutely looking at unconscious bias. But in terms of this specific policy, as it's been raised as a point, we will double check what training operative will receive in advance of obviously putting on the camera, and we will look to see how we can make sure that we factor in bias around understanding what unconscious bias is and how it might apply in this case. We'll make sure we do.
Okay, so when the papers come to, because the recommendation comes to full council, that will be all updated in the EQIA. Yeah. Okay, so councillors need to see this to vote on it. So if we're as happy as we can be for this particular moment in time, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you. Item 16, which is resolved, which would be a resolved matter, should we recommend it for resolution, is appointment to the Devon and Torbay Housing Advisory Group. And this one is you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. So the proposal is in relation to the emerging governance structure for the Devon and Torbay County Combined Authority, or CCA, as it's known. Part of that emerging governance structure is to form what they're calling a housing advisory group, acronym HAG, which will replace, there's currently an informal housing task force, as it's called, represented by all Devon councils and the county council, which has been meeting for a few years now, and obviously Exeter City Council is represented. So the idea is to replace that informal group with a more formalised group, which will be constituted as part of the CCA architecture, and it'll have its own terms of reference. However, I would also emphasise that it will operate as an advisory group. So it won't have any powers, just the same as the actual combined county authority itself. So the idea is that each of the Devon councils will nominate an appropriate elected member. The expectation is that all of those elected members' nominations will have been agreed and gone through each individual council's processes by the end of the calendar year, so that an initial setup meeting, I guess, could take place and be convened early in the new year. So I think the recommendation is for the leader of the council, Councillor Bialik, to be Exeter City Council's representative on that group.
Okay, just before we go into the discussion, just to say we've got a team, what they call a Teams Devon meeting, which really won't be dealing with this, but this general thing. We have a Devon leaders meeting on Friday where we're talking a bit more about how we're going to put ourselves forward as the districts within the CCA now that it's gone through the parliamentary stages. And then obviously once we've settled a few things in terms of reference and everything else that's come out, I'm hoping I don't think I've told you yet, Bindu, to have some sort of presentation to councillors as to, right, here is the CCA, this is what it's looking like, it's gone through the various process, these are the various agreed terms of references, and this is our involvement, this is what's going on. And still that is, as I said, until Friday, I don't quite know what that looks like, but we have to do this putting me on there as a leader with all the other leaders, which is more of a, although advisory, strategic look. We need to have it done by the end of the calendar year. So just if that helps explain a little bit, because it is wading through treacle, trying to get all this stuff sorted. It is difficult because everybody's jockeying and everything's like this, and nobody wants to come forward as such. So I'll just open that up to the members on this at the moment. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. I know it's early doors and things are still developing. I just wonder if there's any indication from the emerging terms of reference that there will be the opportunity for you to designate a stand-in for you if you're unable to make a meeting.
The deputy leader.
Anybody? No, Councillor Wright, I don't know if we got it grammatically correct.
On this occasion.
I must say the apostrophe came from my colleague on the right. The pedant, yes. Yeah, I have no pedantry. It's just to say how crucial this is, having been on the task force, which was a really useful thing to be on, and that task force then pushed forward the Commission's report, which we've seen and read. Doesn't mean we can take all the recommendations and act upon them, but it was such a useful document. So that's what the task force did. Things are at a much higher level now, and it's absolutely essential that the leader of the council now sits on that group, because it's going to be a very strategic group with other leaders from other councils. I know they'll be advising the newly formed CCA, but when we're talking about bringing forward housing targets in Exeter, we have to start looking outside of Exeter and working with other partners to bring these forward. And so in 8.5, where it's just doing a bullet point of the role of this new group, the tag, delivering more social, affordable and low carbon homes is a real key thing there. So absolutely support the recommendation to put the leader in that leadership position. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else on the executive? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. Can I follow up from Councillor Wood's point? Telepathy has worked from one end of the room to the other. So a point that came across to me, this is going to be possibly the first of many advisory groups that might be set up under this. They've got roles of task and finish groups under that potentially. So I think I would ask the leader to carry forward Councillor Wood's idea as a generic one, that where district councils are involved in advisory bodies or groups, where there is a named person, that person has the power to have a substitute if they're unable to attend. Because I think matters as important as this, it's important that all district councils there, and in your case, it could be the deputy leader, or it could be a portfolio leader in a particular case, particularly if it's a task and finish. But I think this is something we ought to ask them to write into their terms of reference or their standing orders, so that all district councils are playing on a level playing field.
Yes, Councillor Moore.
Thank you. So we recently looked at the Housing Commission report, and I take it the housing strategy is not yet developed, because that will flow from this. And I'm just wanting to just be really clear about this remit. Many of the bullet points relate to providing more affordable and social homes. But is that the focus of the group, or is it just going to be housing to meet housing targets? To what extent will it be focused on addressing the housing crisis that we have here in Exeter and more widely in Devon? Because this could be a bit ambiguous, this brief, because if we're just focusing on meeting targets, then much of that affordable housing may be cast aside.
Okay, well, Councillor Wright's just pointed out to me quite rightly at the bottom of 364 may help some of that for you, Councillor. But just to say, yes, I've was it in this paper or another paper I've read today in preparation for tomorrow or Friday, which is quite clear about the deputy coming in my. So this is the trouble. I'm getting so many things and just to say, I want to assure you that somehow I'm not accumulating all these positions, which takes me away from the council, because I need to stay here to keep an eye on everything. all right, Michael? And so, so I'm not going to be sent away. I mean, for instance, on Friday, this is just way of information, we've got a number of issues to discuss as the Devon leaders. There's an audit and governance committee. There's also scrutiny roles and some what they call the joint committees. All right. Now, clearly, that's a full-time job being on all of that. So I need to be on this one for now, and I don't even know who the two representatives representing the districts will be on the CCA board. We are not a voting thing, and I have been to a couple already because I am the outgoing chair, if you see what I mean, but we will formalise it on Friday. So once I've done that, what we need to pass go at the moment, and this is what this is doing, I'll sit down with the chief executive and the executive and say, right, how are we going to be representative here effectively? Now, that's not, we've got all those positions here in this council. They have to be divvied up amongst all the other districts. So you can imagine the politics of all of that, can't you? And so what I'm trying to assure you is there's roles in there that we'll have to look at the appropriate times. I do not intend to consume them all for myself. It is about strategic planning, and I think that's what we need to do. So the joint committee, I think that was the one which is coming. That's the one I read about, having a deputy on the joint committee. So that's the one. No, that's the next one. See, I'm already at next month's executive, and we're dealing with that. But the principle applies, is what I'm trying to assure people, that we need Exeter to have a voice at every meeting, and we should never ever send apologies, is what I'm saying in those meetings, and we don't normally. So those are the recommendations to be resolved here. I'll move myself from the chair. There you go. All those in favour? Yes, I'll say, Bob, you better. Thank you very much. So, as I said, we will try to do some sort of briefing on the CCA. It is an important thing, and also what CCAs may look like in years to come. A very big thing for this council, I can assure you, going forward. So we now move on to item 17, the selection and appointment of the Exeter Harbour designated person. This is a resolved matter. As I say, we do have a part 2. If you want to talk about the part 2, 17A, you need to indicate, and we will go into part 2 meeting. And I suppose technically there's no point agreeing it and then say, no, we're going to part 2, because we've already agreed it. So if you think you want to say something about the part 2, 17A, you need to say now, and then we will pass a resolution to go into part 2. Okay, no, I'm not seeing it. So we'll deal with, I want to do it in the right way. We're now dealing with item 17, which is the selection and appointment of the Exeter Harbour designated person. Kat, you've been waiting a long time for this. Tell us all about it.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to keep this quite concise. The report outlines the steps taken to identify an appropriate appointment for the role of designated person, and does recommend James Hannon, who is Associate Maritime Consultant at ABP Mer. He's both suitably qualified and was the most competitive offer received from our applicants. To meet Department of Transport's Port Marine Safety Code requirements, the executive, as harbour duty holders, must appoint a designated person to provide independent assurance on the efficacy and operation of the port safety systems. There are very specific competencies for the role. Guidance identifies a competent designated person as having relevant first-hand experience of the port marine environment and operation, having appropriate knowledge of shipping, shipboard operations and port operations, understanding in the design, implementation, monitoring, auditing and reporting of safety management systems, and an understanding and being able to apply assessment techniques for examining, questioning, evaluating and reporting on operations and safety management systems. In consideration of this, the council's harbour master approached 5 individuals known to hold those industry competencies, receiving 2 applications, both qualified master mariners with demonstrable competencies and also holding suitable professional indemnity. Of the 2, James Hannon is considered to have the most extensive port marine safety specific experience. He's the current DP with Dorset Council and Peel Ports Group, and was actually formerly the policy lead and subject matter expert to the Department of Transport for Port Marine Safety Code operations, technical advice and assurance auditing. In addition, as I've already said, he had to having that extensive relevant experience, the quote he provided was very competitive. The appointment is not statutory, so there does remain the option to do nothing. However, the appointment of a designated person to mitigate marine safety risks and assure the efficacy of the port marine safety system is considered a reasonably practicable measure to ensure moral and legal compliance and prevent potential prosecution of the duty holder under the Health and Safety of Work Act 1974.
Thank you. Before I open it up, I can't tell by the photograph. Is that the person who came to give us that presentation as the duty holders? No, because he was very good. But I see no. They were all very good, all very technical, and I got it. So we've also had some training on all of that, and we need to, I won't say refresh because I can still remember most of it, if not all of it. We need to know what we've got to do next, and I assume we're waiting for this person in posting yourselves because we've got to start operating properly as a duty holder, is what I would say. Right, members of it, Councillor Williams.
Just to answer your question just now, Chair, that we are holding a meeting, Kat, myself, the Harbour Master and Simon Copper, looking at duty holder governance. So actually mapping out what we need to do when. So that is in hand for 13th of January. So you will be informed.
I know that's not what the
no,
paper is.
but it's just to reassure that it's I thank Kat for her excellent introduction, because it has been a process. We've done our we've appointed the duty holder, we've done our training, and now it's the DP. So it's we're on this making good progress, I'd say, and I'm very, very relieved that we've got a DP. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Is there any other members of the committee wish to speak? No, Councillor Moore, you had your. I thought one of you had your hands raised. That was all. Okay, that's fine. You can wave to me. That's all right. Right. So you've got the recommendations before you. I'm going to move them from the chair.
Second.
All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
So we're not going into 17A, and so as I always say at this time, happy birthday next week, Ian. Under the age discrimination, I'm not allowed to say how old you are, but you're only just a bit younger than me, by the way. And to wish everybody, if that's possible, a very Merry Christmas, or whatever you're doing. Enjoy your time. See you all at the council meeting.